All right, so I don't know if anyone's heard the news, but One American News Network has been suspended by YouTube. The censorship war is still on and popping, even greater than before. Let's roll. Now, I want to welcome everyone to my channel. This is Bruce the Boss Brooks. And if you are new to the channel and or returning but have not yet subscribed, I really want to urge you to go ahead and smash on that subscription button and the little notification bell. We are facing a censorship war where big tech and mainstream media is trying to drown out any and all alternative information, voices, and or dialogue that is contrary to the official mainstream media narrative and or propaganda. And your subscriptions go a long way with fighting the algorithm that's trying to suppress alternative information and or channels like this. And don't forget to smash on that like button and share this video, comment on this video. Let's get into it. So I'm just chilling on Thanksgiving Eve, minding my business. Just got done walking the dog, getting a little drink of water, had a nice little walk. All is good. Come back in, check the news, and I find out One American News Network, one of the few alternatives that has been growing lately, in addition to Newsmax, has now been suspended by YouTube. And here's why. So let's look into YouTube and this whole suspension. Why did they suspend One American News Network? So here we are scrolling on through. All right, so YouTube has suspended One American News Network for sharing misinformation about a COVID cure. So there it is. The first paragraph, is already trying to label this as a channel that is a favorite of President Trump. We all know that they have a negative opinion of President Trump, so this is already viewed as an... All right, so that's the first attack. Let's see. The suspension is going to last about a week. No new videos can be put, nor can they make any money in the future until they rectify the issue. And look how they're already trying to lump this in with QAnon and Pizzagate affiliated accounts. And they talk about Pizzagate as though it's a conspiracy theory about a pedophile ring involving members of the United States Democratic Party operating out of a pizza restaurant. That has nothing to do with the Pizzagate. They're already miscategorizing that. I probably got to do a whole separate video on that later. But basically what, next paragraph down is how YouTube is trying to really put a stop on misinformation regarding COVID-19. And after careful review, it looks like One American News Network supposedly made mention of a guaranteed cure. So looking at the final paragraph at the bottom, there was some mention of a guaranteed cure. Now, I think there's more information in here that has me alarmed because I'm looking at, the next couple of paragraphs. At one point here, it says that it has already removed over 200,000 videos related to dangerous or misleading COVID-19 information since February. And what's really alarming is right after that, it says this week, a group of Democratic senators wrote to YouTube chief executive Susan urging the company and her to remove all election outcome misinformation. So that's why One American News Network got suspended. This is what's going on, trying to clean up the platform. And scarier is, again, you have Democratic senators trying to co-opt YouTube to then remove anything that counters the narrative of what they're trying to put out. So now YouTube is apparently in the business of telling you what you can and cannot hear, deciding for you what is helpful. They do not think that you have the capacity to think for yourself, judge for yourself, assess the information to determine whether or not if it's true or false. They're going to be the arbiters of truth, facts, and or lies. But if they're going to take on the role of harmful information as it pertains to COVID-19, where are the suspensions on lockdowns? Because they say follow the science, and yet the science has not in any kind of unilateral decision said lockdowns work. For one thing, you have Sweden. Whether or not there are studies pointing to this or to that, you have Sweden not doing a study. They're actually living it. There have been no lockdowns. They've made some policy modifications, informed the public, no mask mandate, businesses remained open, schools remained open for anyone under the age of 16 without catastrophic results. In fact, they're doing just as well, if not better, than many countries around the world. Although a lot of people just want to do a direct comparison to their direct neighbors of Denmark and Finland, without looking a little bit further south and saying, well, how are they doing compared to the United Kingdom or France or Spain, the United States, Australia? And the truth of the matter is they're doing no worser. But aside from that, even the World Health Organization, who they claim to be following, has come out at some point in the past few months and said lockdowns are not an effective long-term strategy. They do not work. So where are all of the suspensions on all of the pushes for lockdowns, all of the encouragements for locking down, canceling Thanksgiving, without canceling Black Friday, might I add? Because we know for a fact that lockdowns are harmful. Lockdowns destroy economies, because an economy is not just a light switch that you can flicker on and off. For the small businesses, mom and pop shops, or even, I don't even want to say all mom and pop shops, but, just medium to small size businesses, whether it be restaurants, bodegas, little mini marts, have been crushed by this. Small retail stores, they're being crushed, whether you're an actual employee who has now gone on unemployment, or if you are the business owner themselves, and that's an even greater loss, because now you just lost your whole life savings, your business. You weren't just some employee, and there's no way for you to move forward because you weren't generating the revenue you needed to make payroll or pay the rent. And it's not like there were rent forgiveness. And aside from the loss of income, loss of one's livelihood, with unemployment either comes, and it did, an increase in suicide rates. We had many physicians talking about how they were seeing more suicide, counseling more suicide patients or potential suicide victims than they were COVID patients. Because again, they've lost their livelihood, means of supporting themselves, future looks bleak, and then you also lock them down in their homes with very limited to no contact with any other human beings outside the members of their own household. Suicides increase as a result of lockdowns. You destroy businesses and livelihoods. And so when you force people into poverty, crime increases. And we've seen crime, violent crimes, rise as much as 133% in a lot of these major cities. In fact, I greatly believe that the explosive riots that we saw around the country after the George Floyd situation was a powder cake of people who just were so bubbled up with frustration from months of lockdown that they were just ready to explode. So you have the increase in crime, you have the increase in poverty, which leads to high suicide rates, high crime. Let's not forget about the children who are losing out on an education, because we had an educational system that was okay. Shout out to all the great teachers out there. But even with the in-person learning, proficiency at best in many of the states were no higher than 45%. And that's the best case scenario in a lot of states. Average proficiency was only 33, 36%. So the education lack of, kids are now losing out on a good quality education. They're not learning as much from home because their attention doesn't have to be there. Distance learning presents a grave challenge, especially if you have any kind of mental disability, whether it be ADHD, attention deficit disorder, or any other kind of learning disability, and you can't focus. Or what about the lower income families who have lower level internet connections, and so you have try to have multiple people online at once, and it knocks them out. So you have a grave number of people kids who are getting disinterested in learning. They're not really learning as much as they could or should. Without a proper education, without proper preparation and skills, your future is going to get bleak. You won't really even have that many job opportunities, which again, then the cycle repeats itself. Poverty, high levels of crime, and/or suicide. So what are we going to do about the people who are promoting these lockdowns, which are very harmful, for a COVID virus, this is a fact. And there's no way you can say this harmful. This is coming from the CDC themselves as well. The fatality rate for the COVID-19 virus, if you're in between the ages of infancy to 19, the fatality rate is 0.00003%. That was 4 zeros in front of the 3. How about those in between the age of 20 and 49? The fatality rate is 0.0002%, if I'm not mistaken. And then if you're in between the ages of 50 and 69, it did take a bit of a jump to 0.005%. But you're still talking about, at very worst case scenario, a survival rate of 99.995%. And even with that, the overwhelming majority of people and they're all talking about cases. So I love how the narrative changed from flatten the curve and don't overwhelm the hospital to cases. No longer talking about death rates, no longer talking about overwhelming hospitals, because that just was not happening. And the death rate has definitely plummeted and or stabilized. But even with California, for instance, only because I have the numbers fresh off the top of my head, ever since they started spiking up the testing done in the state from November the 1st through November the 16th, I can speak to these numbers specifically. 102,175 Californians tested positive for COVID, and which averaged about 7.8 thousand people a day. And they're getting alarmed. But here's the thing. So 7,800 test positives on average a day, which led to over, again, 102,175 test positives, and yet only 4,500 hospitalizations out of 102,000. That's barely over 4%, barely 4% of all of the test positives, meaning individuals are not overwhelming the hospitals, they're not getting sick. Most people, at least under the age of 40, are either asymptomatic or their symptoms are so mild they can be easily confused with allergies or a cold, maybe even a mild flu at best. That's the overwhelming majority of people. So cases, most people only know they have it because they're getting tested. It does get worse the older you get, because again, I said, from the ages of 50 to 69, the fatality rate was 0.005%. And then it only gets higher when you get into your 70s. In California, where over 75% of the test positives were people under the age of 35, 80% of the people hospitalized and or reportedly died of the COVID-19 virus during that same time span were over 70 years old. So they make up less than 15-20% of the total test positives in California, but made up over 80% of the actual hospitalizations and or fatalities. So clearly this is a virus that is not that harmful to the majority of people under the age of 50. And that's what we know for a fact. And while some people can point to people who have had more moderate and or severe symptoms to the COVID-19 virus under the age of 50 and or during their 50s, they represent such a small minority. You might as well talk to me about lottery winners, because there's a Powerball and a jackpot winner every single year. Screw that, every so many months, because you always see the Powerball and jackpot number rise up to 100 million or 200 million, 250 million, all of a sudden reset back down to 40 million. Someone's winning the lottery, Powerball, Mega Million all the time. But it's such a rarity. So are the individuals who are like me, young, healthy, take care of themselves, no pre-existing conditions. So long as you don't have a pre-existing condition that's already doing a major taxing on your body, like you're massively overweight, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, type 2 diabetes, and or you're not in your 70s, you're straight. But if you are elderly and or severe pre-existing conditions, you need to be taking every precaution you can. But I digress. That's the truth about this virus. This is a very discriminative virus that only attacks severely. You can test positive, but it only is severe to those who are elderly and or those who have not really been taking that great care of themselves and therefore have severe pre-existing conditions. lockdowns are not that necessary. You're destroying or doing the great reset for what? So where are the suspensions on them is what I want to know. This is a really harmful precedent, I think, that is being set by big tech and their attempts to control information and control what you do or don't know. Because we saw them do this with the Frontline Doctors of America, led by Dr. Simone Gold. These were medical professionals. They've always said, follow the science, listen to the medical professionals. And yet when medical doctors shared their facts based upon their experiences, their patients, and say, this is what's worked for us, this is what's worked for our patients, 100% success rate, so much of what you're being told is not true. You need to have all of the information within 12 hours of them making that declaration outside the Supreme Court, United States Supreme Court House, or the Supreme Court of the United States steps, I should say. Their video was being banned all across YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Who are you to be the arbiters of what is harmful information, what is information that is correct, that people need to have, especially when there really is no great consensus on any of this, because there are thousands of medical professionals and experts, practicing physicians who disagree. So that's really dangerous. I mean, we really need to start rising up, because ignorance is still a choice, and ignorance is a prison that humanity is kept in. But we are living in a time and in a society where they're trying desperately so hard not to make ignorance a choice anymore by acting like communist China and literally censoring any information that counters the official narrative, even if it's coming from qualified experts and, or in this case, medical professionals, trying to silence any and all alternative information. Because don't think I overlooked that one part in the article where it talked about Democratic senators reaching out to YouTube's chief executive officer, trying to get her to, and get the company to literally ban any and all individuals who question the corruption that we're seeing and or irregularities that are blatant out there with this election, for instance. And I'm sure I'm going to get a little flag just for mentioning this at the bottom of my YouTube page. But it's just getting dangerous that they're trying to censor any and all alternative information. And that's how propaganda really works, people. It's like we really are at a war right now for our mind and bodies and for the future, which is starting to look really bleak if we don't really stand up for what we believe in, stand up against all of the lies and misinformation. But that's my video, really. I don't really have, I have more to talk about as it pertains to Pizzagate. I'll say that for another video, but it's just really disturbing to see a major news network like One American News Network get suspended for exercising their freedom of speech without there being any chance of actual rebuttal and or allowing people to hear the information for themselves and know whether or not it's true. Because I would love to know, how do they know what One American News Network said isn't true? Did they actually test what they said, test the medication that they were proclaiming, if they did at all? I don't know, but you really need to leave that up to the people to decide, especially if you're going to fall under the protection of, was it Act 230, if I'm not mistaken, where you're not considered a publisher and also therefore not liable for the information that the people put out there. So I'm like, you can't have it both ways. But that's just a video. I want to know your thoughts or comments. Leave your comments down below. Like this video, share this video. Again, if you are not yet subscribed, please subscribe. Really appreciate your support. This is Bruce the Boss Brooks. Happy holidays to everyone. Happy Thanksgiving. Celebrate the way you want. I did a video on that. Please go check that out. But I'm out for now. Peace.